Hi there, I'm Jon Besko, Program Director with GDIT. I've been with the company for about 15 years now and have been active duty Air Force for about 10 years prior to that. Today I'm joined by Mr. Dan Velez from Everfox.
Hi, Dan Velez from Everfox. I'm a senior advisor for insider risk at Everfox. Been at Everfox for about 15 plus years now, and also retired from the military, from the Navy.
Fantastic. So Dan, just to set the stage on our conversation today, insider threat, that could mean a lot of things to a lot of different organizations. What does it mean to Everfox?
Sure, insider threat, and there's a lot of consternation in our domain, as you're probably aware, about the use of the terms threat and risk and so on. At the end of the day, the insider threat, those are unfortunately, these are people, these are humans. These are folks who have trusted access to facilities, information systems, and so on. And they bring with their authorized access risk to organizations.
Great. I really like how you hit on the human aspect of insider threat. I really think that's what it distinguishes itself from cybersecurity. A lot of people think those two missions are interchangeable, and we at GDIT think they're very complementary of each other and can leverage each other's technologies. However, there's a little bit of a difference there. Did you want to touch on that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of focus on the cyber aspect because today, at our keyboards, at our desks, we have access, employees have access to vast amounts of information. There's a lot of potential for misuse, mishandling information, and so on. But cyber is not the only piece of the problem, right? It begins with managing the risks, managing those issues, begins with how we hire, how we onboard, how we deal with issues, promoting, moving, escalate, across the organization, and finally, offboarding and sending someone on to their next journey. It's a complete life cycle issue.
Absolutely agree. From a cyber defense standpoint, very important to have that classic defense in depth strategy, protect the perimeter of your network from outsiders getting in. But when you start to see insiders who are trusted employees who are doing great things for your organization, they have a certain level of trust, have access to certain levels of information that the outsiders don't have. So all of a sudden that zero trust model doesn't completely defend against some of those threats that they can pose to the organization.
No, that's exactly right. And even, as you're mentioning that, I'm thinking about, privileged users, those who really understand weaknesses within an organization, which controls are really working well, where is information located, how is it handled, and so on. So those with access inside the organization really have the potential to do the greatest harm.
Absolutely agree. And I think that's why insider threat is just so important. We bring these employees in and we teach them at their orientation how to readily access all of our very protected, sometimes secret information, and they have to work with it every day through the course of their normal positions. And the classic cybersecurity tools don't necessarily guard against some of those things that insiders can do in a malicious manner against the org.
No, that's exactly right. And I think that so often a lot of organizations really begin to scope the issue of insider risk into the DLP domain. And it's just about thumb drives, when really, the scope and breadth and depth of the programs that we're working on together deal with not only theft of intellectual property, but other important issues around the organization, such as fraud, inadvertent disclosure, or intentional disclosure, as well as threats of harm, right? Threats of harm to themselves or other employees. So the scope of the problem, well beyond cyber.
That's really important. I think really well defined in terms of while cyber and being on an IT system may be a vector to commit an attack, it's really goes back to that human behind the keyboard, and we have to assess the risk that that human is presenting, and cyber is not the only answer to that.
That's exactly right. And cyber is not, cyber isn't always the target or the victim. Sometimes it's simply a witness to other activities that are ongoing, maybe inappropriate and unauthorized business conduct on the unclassified systems. The solutions themselves or the information systems themselves, not always the target.
Well said. So we've both been with our respective companies for a while now, and I think we've been doing a lot of partnership behind the scenes. Would you touch on a few of those examples?
First of all, let's talk about partnership. We pride ourselves at Everfox in developing solutions that really enhance the effectiveness of an organization to defend against insider threats, and the risks that they pose. But for me, the partnership begins when we're working with like GDIT, who delivers the services, take the tools, take the technologies. The tool is the potential. GDIT is delivering, the outcome that actually demonstrates the value.
That's been my experience as well, and I've never come across a situation where it's an either or. Our capabilities between our two companies really work well together, between the tools and digital accelerators that we each field, and then the solution, subject matter experts that might be on site working that. We're really tackling it together, sometimes from two ends of the coin, but we're really meeting in the middle and complementary work that's really adding value to our customer base.
That's right. Immediately, I think of the latest example of us working together, and that's with our psycholinguistic analysis capabilities, right? Helping organizations identify through authored communications the potential that someone is disgruntled, and which, as you know, and Dr. Shaw's critical pathway to insider risk, he talks a lot about disgruntlement as being the thing that should make your hair stand on end when adverse cyber events are occurring or other events. That presence of disgruntlement is important. Working together, developing that capability.
Absolutely, and to your point of sometimes cyber being a witness, and especially in the realm of that psycholinguistic analysis capability, authored communications, probably the most valuable stream of data that can help identify risk within an organization. And whether that's emails, chats, even social media posts, or things that someone might be writing in a Word document on their desktop, that's a treasure trove for detecting risk.
And in this age of AI, we're also expanding that capability into interaction with AI agents.
Good
right?
point.
That conversation is, also an authored communication. So
Right.
just an example in the last few months of additional capabilities we've been adding.
That's a great point. And being able to do that data collection and analysis at scale and deliver results real time to our analysts so they can take action on that information has really been a game changer.
That's right. That's the power of AI. One customer of ours, in fact, mentioned that we often deal with levers and the problems that levers can pose to an organization, taking data, potentially sabotage, and a whole host of potential issues. But this customer has been doing manual reviews of communications and other activities, like a lot of prudent employers do, as folks with sensitive access leave the organization. Instead of doing manual reviews of communications now, they can scan tens of thousands of communications and get deeper into the population of employees that are departing the organization, having a more effective offboarding process.
So Dan, it's funny, I've actually got a great example of what you were just referencing there. About a decade or so ago, when we were first fielding our psycholinguistic analysis capability, we had a GDIT, digital forensic investigator, who was manually going through about terabytes and terabytes of data, supporting a case for federal law enforcement. And in essence, he was looking for signs of disgruntlement in the subject of interest that was being investigated and some outbursts that he may have had throughout the office. Over weeks and manual, painstaking analysis, that investigator was able to identify about a dozen or so emails of concern to fill in the timeline for those federal law enforcement partners to really find out when that employee might have been going over the edge. We were able to bring in the psycholinguistic capabilities when it was still in its very early stages, run all of those terabytes of data through it, and in very short order, we were able to turn around some really great results of not only flagging those dozen emails that he found manually, but found about 10 more that were also of great interest to that law enforcement partner. So it's just really a great example of technology as an enabler that can save a lot of time throughout the course of an analysis or an investigation.
Absolutely. Speed, scale, efficiency, and the time that he was spending searching for words, searching for terms, generating scores now is better spent on analyzing the problem, really giving deeper consideration of what's going on. Do we really understand the magnitude and scope? All those things that analysts do.
Absolutely. So one of the things you touched on earlier was Dr. Shaw's critical pathway to insider risk, and really wanted to circle back to hit home on this truly being a human problem. at GDIT, we use that critical pathway to insider risk as our framework. That's how we train our analysts, how we train our tools in order to look for those patterns of badness, if you will, and being able to scientifically, quantitatively score that risk in a very repeatable manner.
This is exactly how we've been tailoring our tools. I'm so glad that our community has really embraced it, or has a model that really works well. I'm using the model not only to have a conversation with a potential customer about what the tool does, but when we talk about progression and maturation of an insider risk program, I often use the tool also to talk about how do we mature? We start off on the right, where the bad things begin to happen, and it's very reactive when organizations just get started in understanding this problem space and dealing with the issues. But with the introduction of tools and technologies, it's pushing that detection, to the left, right? So we are going from reactive to proactive.
Absolutely, and we like to say left of boom or left of bang.
Sure.
While you can't completely predict a bad event from happening, you can certainly identify some of the risk that is posed by those individuals and maybe put a little bit of a closer eye on individuals that are starting to express some really concerning behaviors toward the organization, being able to flag those sooner and take some action sooner. Better to have a smaller security incident rather than a really big data leak or espionage investigation.
Exactly. I've been using that model as well to educate and inform, young insider risk programs about the significance of various detection aspects we may use and defense aspects. So, for example, to understand the purpose of a control, like a background check. What is the purpose of the background check? That's those predispositions that someone comes with. So the critical pathway to insider risk is great for the analysts to see that we got the whole picture, but it's also fantastic for organizations to understand what's the purpose of the various controls. When we ask, for example, that we'd like to begin to examine job search postings and updates of resumes, where does it fit in the model? And it fits nicely in those, the behavior section.
Yeah, that's a great point. And from a training and awareness standpoint that you touched on, it's really helpful to see how the organization responds to some of those early concerning behaviors, because oftentimes an organization can help the problem, but sometimes they can make the problem a little worse as well. So from a full capability standpoint, with all of our tools looking at a situation as it develops, it provides a good means for us to educate HR organizations, supervisors, other leadership in order to understand how to respond to these kind of first line problems when they see them, again, before it gets worse. And just another example of getting left of the action.
Precisely. And before the critical pathway really became openly discussed and frequently discussed in the community, I hadn't heard the term maladaptive organizational response before, right? But Dr. Shaw will use that to describe how managers can make the problem worse. So we have some incredible technologies. You deploy and operationalize those technologies. If the organization isn't postured to react and respond in an appropriate way when those precursors begin to reveal themselves, and we say, hey, there might be a problem with Bob, right? They're not prepared to actually take some type of action or response. We're failing.
Absolutely. So as we've been discussing here, insider threat is much bigger than just data loss prevention. Where do you see that growing, and where do we need to put the awareness out and deploy capabilities to address those other things?
Well, the other adverse activities that or adverse impacts that insiders can have across the organization are areas where we're concentrating on. Really, in the last probably in the last 12 months or so, there's been a lot of conversations and talk around, because of a lot of public events that have occurred around employee wellness, all right, and threats of harm to self and others, which is a real big departure from talking to general counsel or HR about a thumb drive, right? This is a completely different conversation. Well, it's an area that has a lot of attention these days. And organizations that, at the board level, we're hearing more conversations about employee wellness. So we're going to continue to work on that area.
Great point, and we're really sharing a brain on that one. We've seen that as well, especially since the COVID-19 pandemic, just mental issues really entering more so into the workplace, and people are dealing with a lot more stuff at home, at work, out in the community, in the news, what have you, and you can't just leave that at home or check it when you badge into the badge reader. So we have to account for that as well. And to your point, we're not just looking for someone who's exfiltrating data off a thumb drive. We're also identifying folks that may be going through a lot of those mental stressors and might even be facing some suicidal ideations. So our capabilities can help identify those folks and really get them the help that we need. And while insider threat has this big, scary, negative connotation, we're really there to protect the workforce, and our capabilities are saving lives on a regular basis.
Absolutely. It's not just about taking the badge off of someone's chest and taking them out to the turnstiles, right? It's ideally what we're trying to do is get that person the resources that they require and get them back into the seat, back to their job again.
Absolutely, and good example to touch on it through our capabilities and our advanced analysis of identifying these trends of suicidal ideations and saving lives. One of our particular customers that we work together on site, we've been able to show those trends, and it's an organization where there's a lot of government employees as well as contractor employees that sit on site. Originally, EAP services were only available to those government employees there. However, through our capabilities, identifying those suicidal ideations in the contract workforce, we were able to affect organizational change, overall policy of a big agency to allow contractors to get those immediate EAP services. And again, work together with the bigger insider threat program throughout the organization to save lives.
And it's I'm glad that you mentioned that, because at the end of the day, we realize why do we have a program? What are we trying to accomplish? Really, we're trying to drive a continuous improvement in employees' lives, the security, awareness, and culture, this family that all organizations strive to develop and create, and protect that family.
Absolutely. It's certainly a dynamic mission area, and I never know what I'm going to face when I come in, whether it's a new espionage case, workplace violence, a fraud case. It's always exciting, but we're certainly there to partner together and with our customers really to protect their mission and protect their people. Well, thanks, Dan. I really enjoyed our chat here today. I think this was a really great conversation.
Well, thanks for having us, and we look forward to continuing to evolve, develop, and improve these insider risk management programs in our customer spaces.
Absolutely. And to learn more about the insider threat capabilities that GDIT can provide, feel free to visit gdit.com/perspectives for more information.